Make a joyful noise to the Lord, all ye lands, enter his presence with praise and thanksgiving. And I am thankful to see you all here today. I was looking around earlier and I told Herb, I said, it looked like we're going to get a lot of people out today. So I want to thank all of you who showed up today, including my brother James back there, who is not a visitor, but I'm just glad he's here, as well as everyone else is here today. So we've had a lot going on today. We've had a quiz. I got 9 out of 10, and I'm not bragging about that because I should have got 10 out of 10. So I got to do better, and there's always room, even though there was rumors of me cheating, trying to say that, the election was rigged, but that's okay. We know. But today I want to talk to you about some things that I've learned, because basically every time I get up here, I can only speak to the things that I've been through, okay? And I work for an employee of the United States government, and they sent me to a computer electronics show in Las Vegas the first week of the year. It wasn't as cold out there as it was here, but there was a lot going on in that area that kind of vexed my spirit a little bit, if I can say that. Because Vegas is known as Sin City, right? So before I got out there, my heart was a little troubled. And I asked Brother James and I asked Brother Elder Herb to pray for me, because I know the city's culture. I've been there many times. And now that I've returned home, I want to share with you what God has put on my heart while I was there in Vegas. I wrote this message actually on the Sabbath I was in Vegas, because the convention took place over the weekend. It was Thursday through Sunday, and we flew back Monday. And so I was supposed to be out and about on that Saturday, that Sabbath, going to exhibitions, meeting with vendors and setting up meetings to have them come back and meet with us about some things we want to discuss. So I sent my team out because they weren't Sabbath keepers, but I had to choose God over Caesar. So I stayed in my room, and he showed me some things. And a lot of times we have fears, or we impose things into our spirit that don't really even need to be there. And this is what I learned. So in that first week of this year, my job sent me to Vegas to attend the computer electronics show. There were many vendors from across the world, and they were exhibiting all these different innovations. One of the things we saw was this one company. They were able to pull the moisture out of the air and make drinkable water out of the air. They could pull drinkable water out of the air. And I thought, wow, this is really good, because in those drought-stricken areas like in Africa and other places, but the thing is, it has to be humidity in the air to pull the moisture out. And another thing is, this technology is so expensive that those countries that are drought-stricken like Africa and other countries, they can't even afford the technology. So even though the intention is there, the actual operational, making that thing a reality in those regions is not necessarily going to happen. And so, speaking of that, Vegas, I want to draw a tandem to Sodom and Gomorrah. We all know what happened with the story of Sodom and Gomorrah, and how Lot was delivered from the wrath that fell on those cities. And we're all familiar with the exodus of Egypt that was led by Moses. Now, what we sometimes fail to see, or maybe we know but we just fail to recollect, is there's a common theme there. And I want to point that out today. You can leave Sodom, you can leave Egypt, you can even leave Vegas, but sin doesn't have a zip code or geography. You can leave the city, but that doesn't mean you left the sin. And I'm going to illustrate that to you today. We can look at Atlanta, San Francisco, very large, very pervasive spirit of homosexuality. We can look at Oregon and the state of Washington, very large, pervasive spirit of suicide. Seattle, suicide. A lot of suicides go up in Oregon and in Washington. And then we can look at Detroit. We can look at Memphis. We can look at Miami, New York, Los Angeles. We can look at our nation's capital, Washington, D.C. What do they have all in common? They've all have been the murder capital at one point in history in our nation. So what does that say? Sin does not have a zip code. So, like I said, you can leave your city, move out to the suburbs. You can leave your state, move down south. You can leave a country, move to another country. You can leave Egypt. You can leave Sodom and Gomorrah. But you can't leave sin that easily. It's not as easy as packing up all your stuff and just moving to a different location. Because if it's in your heart, it's going to follow you. So I like to title this message, Leaving Sodom, Leaving Egypt. Because we as saints, we're always striving for a way to avoid and eliminate sin from our lives. However, like I said, changing your location may not always yield the desired result, especially when Sodom or Egypt is in you. We must strive to eradicate that spirit of Sodom, that spirit of Egypt from within, just like these physical cities. If we don't, we must learn, just like what happened to those physical cities, destruction will await us if we don't remove this from us. But I'm just digressing there. But again, let's talk about Vegas, a.k.a. Sin City. Now, in Vegas, there's plenty of food, there's plenty of drink, there's all sorts of vice that you can think of. And coincidentally, while I was there, that wasn't the only convention going on. So you adults may have to explain this to your kids, but there was an adult film festival convention going on. Not Denzel and Tom Hanks type of adult films, okay? So you explain that to your kids. I'm not going to do that up here today. But what I'm saying is, everything that you want in Vegas you can possibly get if you got the money to pay for it. But here's the question that comes to mind. Once you have satiated those temporary desires and you return home to your regular life as a teacher, as a nurse, as someone who works for the city, the state, the government, or even a preacher, what emptiness did that moment of sin actually fill? Your life is still a mess, and probably even worse now that sin has knocked on the door and you have just let it in. Now, here's another example. Now, when I was in Vegas, it's a 3-hour difference, so my time was thrown off. So sometimes I'll just be laying in bed watching TV, and it's literally 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning in Vegas, but it's 6 or 7 o'clock in the morning here, time I'm used to waking up. So I had to get on that time jet lag rhythm and but I was watching different commercials. And this is not in Vegas. This is something I saw on TV. There's a pharmaceutical on the market that treats HIV. I think they call it Devado. What it does is it reduces the detectable levels in your body to a point where the virus is no longer transmittable. But that ain't the selling point. The takeaway of the commercial is that the behavior that resulted in you contracting this virus, which was caused by fornication in the first place, the drug now allows you to resume that behavior without the risk of infecting your partner. You still have HIV, but it is dormant, and you can continue your life of sin. The guy on the commercial, he tells us in the end of the commercial, continue to love who you are and what you are, and keep living. He didn't say this part, I'm just throwing this in here. Keep living the sinful life that put your body and your soul in jeopardy in the first place. That's what he might as well have been saying. So it ain't just Vegas. It's on that TV, that eye of the devil that you see every day. It's coming to you from every angle. It's in the schoolhouse. It's on the job. It's in the streets. But what's worse is it's in the heart. Now, speaking of that commercial, and I was thinking to myself, now if that was me and I got a second lease on life, and by the way, I did. I faced death almost 2 years ago, and I'm going to keep saying it. I know some people tired of hearing it, but the Lord came to me and delivered me, and I am not going to stop talking about the goodness of the Lord. So if you got a second leaf on life, I would think that being delivered from the thing that almost killed you would be the last thing that you would want to continue to do. But the heart wants what the heart wants. I never really understood that. But then the prophet Jeremiah, in the book of Jeremiah, chapter 17, verses 9 and 10, he wrote this. He said, the heart is deceitful above all things and desperately wicked. Who can know it? Verse 10 says, I, the Lord, search the heart. I try the reins, even to give every man according to his ways and according to the fruits of his doings. So, you got to think about when things happen, what are the circumstances of the heart? What is driving that? Because when Lot was delivered from the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah, delivered from that, there were some things that happened. One, his wife looked back because even though she was out of Sodom, for some reason she had to look back. What was back there that cost her her life? Two, him and his daughters escaped into the cavernous mountains. And in Genesis 19:29 through 28, you will see something that happened in the family. And I want to keep that family theme in the back of your mind because we're going to talk about family all the way to the end. In the family, this is what happened. And it came to pass when God destroyed the cities of the plain that God remembered Abraham and sent Lot out of the midst of the overthrow when he overthrew the cities in which Lot dwelt. And Lot went up out of Zoar and dwelt in the mountain, and his two daughters with him, for he feared to dwell in Zoar, and he dwelt in a cave, he and his two daughters. So just imagine after seeing what you think is the world just end before you, there's a amount of fear there. And there's some degree of ignorance, but I'm not saying ignorance in a bad way. I'm saying ignorance in not knowing. See, a lot of people say ignorance and they say it to be negative. But the real meaning of ignorance when you're negative is if you truly ignore something. I don't think if you don't know the word of God, you're ignorant. I think if someone tries to teach you the word of God and you deliberately ignore them, then you're ignorant because you purposely do not want to hear it. So they did not know what was going on. What they had seen was something, it was a world-changing event for them. So the next verse says, and the firstborn said unto the younger, our father is old, and there is not a man in the earth to come in unto us after the manner of all the earth. So basically what they thought was there were no more men in the world. It was just me, my sister, and my daddy. That's what they were thinking. I had to really reconcile that in my mind. And you got to think about that. If that was you back then, how would you have felt seeing that? Next verse. Come, let us make our father drink wine, and we will lie with him that he may preserve the seed. We may preserve the seed of our father. And they made their father drink wine that night. How much wine did he drink? And the firstborn went in and lay with her father, and he perceived not when she lay down, nor when she arose. And it came to pass on the morrow that the firstborn said unto the younger, behold, I lay yesternight with my father. Let us make him drink wine this night also, and go thy in and lie with him that we may preserve the seed of our father. I'm going to stop right there real quick. Keep that verse up. But I'm going to stop right there real quick. First of all, I understand that they thought that they witnessed the end of the world. But they got him drunk the first night, and she lay with him. And then the next night, got him drunk again. I have to ask, what was Lot thinking when all this was going on? At some point, you know, you wake up, you're hungover, and you're like, what just happened here? So, once again, we're talking about family. There's something going on in this family, and I just can't really put my hand on it. I'm praying for God to really give me some more insight into this. But what God told me was, worry about your own family. Hello. Worry about your own family. This is a teaching moment. So go on to the next verse. And they made their father drink wine that night also, and the younger arose and lay with him, and he perceived not when she lay down, nor when she rose. He had no idea. I don't drink like I used to, But I know that if I get that drunk that I don't remember what happened the night before, it's probably a lot of things I can't even do. But that was really something that really made me think. So the next verse says, thus were both the daughters of Lot with child by their father. Now keep going. And the first bare a son and called his name Moab. And the same is the father of the Moabites to this day. And the younger, she also bare a son and called his name Ben-Ami, who is the same as the father of the children of Ammon to this day. If you know where Moabites and the Ammons reside, that's the nation of Jordan. The family that is the kings or the rulers of Jordan are the ones who also put that dome, the golden dome, that's pure gold, over the mosque that's in Jerusalem. Their family did that, the Ammonites. And the kings who rule currently the city or the nation of Jordan are from that lineage. So my point is, though, after being delivered from the wrath of God, Lot's daughters decided to get him drunk and lay with him to conceive the children who would plague the nation of Israel, the Ammonites and the Moabites. And as we know, fornication and sodomy led to the downfall of the cities that they were spared from. And I mentioned, and yet the daughters who were spared were guilty of a sin of fornication just as well. They were delivered from a city only to go up into a cave to still have the same behavior in their hearts. Are you following me? Yes. Okay. So actions have consequences. Not only what they did was questionable and maybe wrong, but the seed that they were trying to preserve was the seed that plagued the Israelites throughout the New Old Testament. If you read through the Old Testament, they were always fighting the Ammonites and the Moabites. And the Moabites even got to this point where they were so perverse that they were doing things that were abominations to the Lord. Abominations. Killing children, all that. Now, I can have a small understanding of what Lot was going through living in Sodom and Gomorrah. But here's the exception. This is how I felt when I was in Vegas. I felt like I was in Sodom and Gomorrah. But I was only there for a few days. Lot lived here. Lot lived in Sodom and Gomorrah. But then my thinking changed when I considered Lot, because in Genesis 13, verses 5 through 13, it kind of explains how he got there. And Lot, which went with Abram, had flocks and herds and tents. So when God told Abram to leave his family, because guess what? They were idolaters. Leave them. He took his nephew Lot with him. And as Abram prospered, so did Lot. And they had multiple flocks, herds, and tents, many people with them. And the land was not able to bear them. There was not enough land for the animals to graze on and for the people to live in peace together. That they might dwell together, for their substance was great. They had a lot of stuff. Their substance was great because God blessed them. So they could not dwell together. And there was a strife between the herdmen of Abram's cattle and the herdmen of Lot's cattle. And the Canaanite and the Perizzite dwelt then in that land as well. And Abram said to Lot, let there be no strife, I pray thee, between me and you, and between my herdmen and your herdmen, for we are brothers. Let us not beef, we're brothers. Is not the whole land before us? Separate yourself, I pray you, from me, that if you take the left, then I will go to the right. Or if thou depart to the right, then I will go to the left. And Lot lifted up his eyes, and he surveyed the land and beheld the whole plain of Jordan, that was well watered everywhere before the Lord destroyed Sodom and Gomorrah. So this is before Sodom and Gomorrah. So Lot saw beautiful land that was well watered, which was very much what was needed for him and his flock. And it even looked as though the Garden of Eden of the Lord, like the land of Egypt and thou comest into Zor. So I'm going to stop real quick right there and just make a real observation that I made. Lot lived in Chaldees of Ur, which was in Mesopotamia, which is Iraq. And God promised to move him to the promised land. But if you go in the Bible and just do a search on, and I forgot to bring it, I had the slide. Do a search on the journey of Abram and Lot as they went and God delivered his people to the promised land. Lot came all the way from the east, went to the west, passed through Israel, went into Egypt. And then where's the promised land that he delivered them to? Israel. He passed through it. But he also followed the Euphrates River and all the tributaries and lakes that went along the way because they had herdsmen and cattle. And they had to be able to furnish and keep their crops maintained. So he took a very, I won't say a very lengthy trip, but I know that the straightest line between any 2 points is a straight line. But he didn't do that. He followed the Euphrates River all the way around. But he went through Israel, which was the promised land that God had promised him, and went into Egypt. But there's a reason for that. God told them that they would be in slavery for 400 years in Egypt, and then he would take them out and bring them to the promised land. But I saw the whole journey of that, and I was like, wow, all this was already planned well ahead and everything. So anyway, getting back to the verses here. Then Lot chose all the plain of Jordan, and Lot journeyed east, and they separated themselves one from the other. Abraham dwelled in the land of Canaan, which is near Israel. And Lot dwelt in the cities of the plain and pitched his tent toward Sodom. But the men of Sodom were wicked and sinners before the Lord exceedingly. He had no knowledge. He had no knowledge. But he was there. And he had made a pact with Abram that he would go this way and Abram would go this way. So he was kind of stuck. But the point is, Sodom is not just that Sodom in the Bible. Because I saw a verse in Revelations 11 and 8 that really made me think, wow, this is something profound. Sodom could be Detroit. Sodom could be Miami. Sodom could be anywhere spiritually. Because it says in the Revelations 11 and 8, and they're talking about the two witnesses. It says, and their dead bodies shall lie in the street of the great city, which is spiritually called Sodom and Egypt, which is where also our Lord was crucified. Where was Yeshua crucified? Jerusalem. But spiritually, it will become Sodom in the book of Revelations. I thought that was pretty profound. So we know what happened to Lot's wife when she looked back. But what about the Israelites and their conduct after they were delivered from over 400 years of slavery? We talked a lot about Sodom and Gomorrah. Let's talk about leaving. We left Sodom. Now we're leaving Egypt. In Exodus 16:2 and 4. Exodus 16:2 and 4. These are some of the things that went on. Now, remember all the plagues. Remember the dividing of the Red Sea. Remember how he threw a piece of tree into the land of Mar and made the bitter water turn sweet. But listen here. It says in Exodus 16:2 and 4, and the whole congregation of the children of Israel murmured against Moses and Aaron in the wilderness. And the children of Israel said to him, would to God we have died by the hand of the Lord in the land of Egypt when we sat by flesh pots and when we did eat bread to the full, for you have brought us forth into the wilderness to kill this assembly with hunger. Then the Lord said unto Moses, behold, I will rain bread from heaven for you, and the people shall go out and gather a certain rate every day, that I may prove whether they will walk in my law or not. So, they've been delivered from slavery. 400 years of having that yoke around them. Being mistreated, eating out of flesh pots, and then going back and actually acting like that was something good. Whatever they didn't want, they put in a flesh pot for you. Fish, whatever. And you would rather have that because you're hungry now. Not to mention that you were their slaves. 400 years. And you've just been delivered from all that. Remember, you didn't leave empty-handed either. You left with gold and silver. You left with all this wealth because God put it on the hearts of the Egyptians to bless you as you exited Egypt. You left Egypt wealthy. You left Egypt free. You left Egypt watching the destruction of Pharaoh's army behind you, a cloud of smoke, a pillar of fire. You saw all these things, and now you're talking about God brought us out here. We'd rather be in Egypt eating the flesh from the flesh pots and the bread that they gave us. And that's not all. Go to Exodus 17, 2 and 4. Wherefore the people chided with Moses and said, give us water that we may drink. And Moses said unto them, why chide you with me? Wherefore do you tempt the Lord? Why are you acting like this? Moses could not understand it. And the people thirst there for water. And the people murmured against Moses. Instead of praying to God and asking him after they've seen what he's done, they complained to Moses and said, where is it that thou hast brought us out of Egypt to kill us and our children and our cattle with thirst? And Moses cried unto the Lord, what should I do unto this people? They be almost ready to stone me. How ungrateful are we at times after all that God has done for us? We're going to talk about these Israelites, but how ungrateful are we sometimes when we wake up and we got a little pain when someone else didn't even wake up? We wake up because and we feel a little pain in our leg, but somebody's walking around with just one leg. We wake up sometimes because we got a pain in our eyes and our vision is blurry, and some people are blind and can't see and wish they could feel that pain. That pain tells you you're alive. That pain tells you to praise God in spite of. And then, to top it all off, in Exodus 32, 1 through 3, they saw God. They saw the hand of God working. They saw that. But once again, sometimes we put a lot of faith in man instead of God. So when the people saw that Moses, as he went up to the mountain to talk to God, because remember, they said when God was talking to them, they got scared and said, don't let him talk to us, Moses, you talk to him. Okay, well, if like I'm sitting up here right now and I'm talking to all of y'all at one time, if I went and talked to my wife and told her the sermon, and then I went and talked to you and told her this sermon, and then I went and talked to Dinah, and then I went and talked to the sister with the shofar and her family one by one, and all of the Herb Hanson's family one by one, you know how much time that takes? Just with one person. So Moses was up there getting all this goodness downloaded into his matrix from the Heavenly Father. And they got impatient. And they gathered themselves together unto Aaron and told Aaron, make us gods which shall go before us. For as for this Moses, the man that brought us out of the land of Egypt, we don't know what's become of him. He up there talking to God. You sent him up there. You sent him up there. But he's taking too long. Well, God was going to download it to all of us. But you didn't want all of that. You wanted Moses to be the filter. So it's going to take a little time to get all this downloaded, because what he was giving him was a lot. A lot. The first 5 books of the Torah. That's a lot of information. But you didn't want it. He was downloading it into all of your hearts. But y'all, don't let God talk to us. We scared. We scared. That's what happened. So next verse. And Aaron said unto them, Aaron, the chief priest, Moses' brother who he left in charge, Aaron, break off the gold earrings which are in the ears of your wives, of your sons and of your daughters, and bring them unto me. And all the people broke off the gold and earrings which were in their ears and brought them unto Aaron. We know what happened next. He made a calf, a golden idol. Not just any, but of one of the gods in Egypt. In Egypt. He left Egypt. They left Egypt. But they didn't leave it in their hearts. They didn't leave it in their hearts. You can't leave something if you don't leave it in your heart. You can sit up here and say whatever you want to say, but if it ain't in your heart, it ain't true. The book of Acts, 7 chapter, verses 34 through 41. It reads, I have seen the affliction of my people which is in Egypt, and I have heard their groaning, and I have come down to deliver them. And now come, I will send thee to Egypt. Next verse. This Moses, whom they refused, saying, who made thee a ruler and judge? The same did God send to be a ruler and deliverer by the hand of the angel which appeared to him in the bush. He brought them out. After that, he showed them wonders and signs in the land of Egypt and in the Red Sea and in the wilderness 40 years. During those 40 years, their clothes didn't wear out, their shoes didn't wear out. I got stuff right now that don't last me 2 years, and it's supposed to be fine quality. Can you imagine walking around in a hot desert for 40 years and whatever you got on is still fresh and clean? But you're not grateful. Next verse. This is that Moses which said unto the children of Israel, a prophet shall the Lord your God raise up unto you of your brethren, like unto me, him shall ye hear. This is he that was in the church in the wilderness with the angel which spoke to him in the Mount Sinai, and with our fathers who received the lively oracles to give unto us. I'm in the book of Acts now. To whom your fathers would not obey, but thrust him from them, and in their hearts turned back again to Egypt. And in their hearts turned back again to Egypt. Saying to Aaron, make us gods to go before us, for as this Moses which has brought us out of the land of Egypt, we don't know what has become of him. And they made a calf in those days, and offered sacrifice unto the idol, and rejoiced in the works of their own hands. So what's my point? What's my point? The children of Israel had a spirit of rebelliousness. Even all that after Yahweh had done for them, all the miracles they had witnessed, and from all the suffering and misery that they had befallen them and been delivered from, they still returned to Egypt in their hearts. We might say that we would never do what they did, but I ask you to examine yourselves when there's no one looking. Examine yourselves and consider the shortfalls that you have. Examine yourselves and ask yourselves, how are you any different? You may not worship a golden calf, but some of you treat money as if it's your God. Oh, it got quiet then, didn't it? Some of y'all treat your cars and your houses as God. And although we don't have no flesh pots from Egypt today, there's still a lot of gluttony, avarice, which is an insatiable desire for wealth, lust, and covetousness. That's going on today. That's going on today. I didn't have to go to Vegas to see these things, people. Some of these things are in the church, let alone in the streets. How many so-called preachers are on television asking you for money in exchange for some holy water or a piece of blessed cloth? Oh, I went there. In Vegas, for instance, I was staying at the MGM Hotel family. I was staying at one of the worst ones, too, but I was just glad to have a place to lay my head for 3 or 4 days. But MGM, Metro Goldwyn Mayer, that's a Hebrew name. They got a big footprint on the strip in the casinos. They have casinos, they have hotels in Massachusetts, they have them here in Detroit, Mississippi, New Jersey, and even Maryland. Not to include they have all those movie studios in California. Now, what perplexes me the most about this company is it was founded by 2 gentlemen who are of so-called Hebrew descent. Yet most of their hotels have an Egyptian theme and idolatry as part of their branding. The Luxor is all Egypt. MGM out there, they got the lions and the pictures of Pharaoh and all the statues. It's all Egypt. It's all Egypt. Now, these are the same descendants that have been educating the world about the horrors of the Holocaust, which haven't even happened 100 years ago. We'll never forget. They're always talking about the Holocaust, which was a very tragic and traumatic event to them. But yet, they done forgot about Egypt. They done forgot about Egypt. 430 years at the hands of oppression of the Egyptians. How is this so? How can they pay such homage to Egypt in their enterprises, yet won't acknowledge the Almighty Yahweh for all that he's done for them? But when you figure that out, you tell me, and I hope while you're at it, you can tell me how we as 21st century believers can be so disobedient and rebellious in our daily walks with the Lord as well, because we ain't too much different than them. Now, there are people who live in Vegas. There are people who have families there. There are people who work there. Not just the people who just go there to gamble and do whatever else is there, because there's a lot of whatever else going on in Vegas. But those people are there for a reason. There's a military base out there. There's a bunch of industry out there. They want to work. They want to have jobs. They want to feel life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, which is what we all have a right to in the Constitution, it says. And even though we want that, sometimes that leads down a sinful path, but not just in Vegas. That can happen here. And I was talking because I had to get around because I didn't want a rental car, so we took Ubers and cabs. So I was talking to the Uber and cab drivers to get a sense of the people who live there. And I'm convinced that everybody who lives in the city is not evil. They just want to live their lives in peace, raise their families, and prosper, be it spiritually, emotionally, or financially. So, if you thought I was going to just stand up here and rail on about the evils of Vegas and somehow come across as pious and holier than thou, then you picked the wrong day to come to service, because that's not what this message is about. It's not about how bad Vegas is. Just like Lot, the residents of Vegas, they were just trying to make a living in a city that was plagued with sin. Well, Vegas is not the only city with that problem. We see it here in Detroit, in the suburbs. We see it all across the country. A man that was over 70-something years old went and shot up a whole bunch of people in California yesterday. Not yesterday, but a couple of days ago. He's 70-something years old. What could he be so mad about? But he went and killed a whole bunch of people. And then another guy turned around and started shooting up some people there. Not in Vegas. That was in California, next door. The point is, the spirit of Sodom or Egypt is in your heart and not where you live. Our government at the local, state, and federal levels, to include our court systems, are plagued by inequity and injustice. You see the 10 Commandments posted on almost every court vegetable, even on the federal government. But yet, how many of them enforce the fourth commandment? It's not easy to enforce the fourth commandment when in that same government system there's a bunch of lying and stealing and murder and covetousness and a whole bunch of other sins being violated, right? So I used to say, well, why don't they enforce the fourth commandment? Honor the Sabbath, keep it holy, remember the Sabbath. They're not even keeping the first commandment. So I can't be mad at them, because that's not where the mission is. The mission is not with them to keep those things. 2 Peter 2, 4, and 9. And I'm almost done because I know we've had a big day here. 2 Peter 2, 4, and 9 says this about Lot. For if God spared not the angels that sinned, but cast them down to hell and delivered them into chains of darkness to be reserved unto judgment, and spared not the old world, but saved Noah, the eighth person, a preacher of righteousness, bringing in the flood upon the world of the ungodly, and turning the cities of Sodom and Gomorrah into ashes, condemned them with an overthrow, making them an example unto those that after should live ungodly. That was an example. And delivered Lot, who was vexed with filthy conversations of the wicked. See, I said earlier, I was in Vegas, unlike Lot, for just 4 days. But Lot chose to live there. But Lot was stuck there. And while he was there, he was vexed with filthy conversations of the wicked. And, next verse, it says, for that righteous man dwelling among them in seeing and hearing, vexed his righteous soul from day to day with their unlawful deeds. Lot was blameless. Some of us who live in Vegas, who live in Detroit, our spirits are vexed by the sins that we see around us from day to day. But it ain't just the city. I'm about to go there. It's in your families. It's in your families. Because cities are just the end result of a community of families. It starts in the family. So as I was walking around Vegas on that Sunday, I realized, I asked these brothers to pray for me, which I should always ask them to pray for me. But there was a lapse in faith on my part. God didn't send me there to be Jonah to save the city of Nineveh. He didn't send me there for that. I was there for a reason, but I was there for a teaching moment. And then on that Sunday, as I was walking up and down the Vegas Strip, I saw people preaching Jesus. I even saw some Jehovah's Witnesses out preaching Jesus. They were outnumbered, but they were out there. At least they were trying, right? I'm not going to say nothing bad about them. And for some reason, I hadn't ate all day. And I don't know if you know, I was at the very last end of the Vegas Strip, and this show was in all the hotels. It was so big that not one hotel conference room could hold it. So the exhibitions were all over the place. So I had to go all the way to the other end of the Strip to actually get to every exhibition, and I did it. And I walked back, and then I realized that's got to be at least 4 or 5 miles back and forth, and I hadn't ate anything. So I went to dinner later on that afternoon, and I was at peace because I thought about what Yeshua said in Matthew 11, verses 18 to 24. And my soul was put at rest. And this is what Jesus said. He said, for John the Baptist, came neither eating nor drinking, and they said he had a devil in him. Okay, the Son of Man, Yeshua himself, he came eating and drinking, and they said, behold, a man who is gluttonous and is a wine-bibber, a friend of publicans, which are tax collectors, and sinners. But wisdom is justified of her children. Next verse. Then he began to upbraid the cities wherein most of his mighty works were done, because they repented not. They repented not. He said, woe unto thee, Chorazin, woe unto thee, Bethesda. For if the mighty works which were done in you, had they been done in Tyre and Sidon, they would have repented long ago in sackcloth and ashes. Okay, but get this. But I say unto you, it shall be more tolerable for Tyre and Sidon at the day of judgment than for you. But go on. And thou, Capernaum, which art exalted unto heaven, shalt be brought down to hell. For if the mighty works which have been done in thee had been done in Sodom, it would have remained unto this day. But I say unto you that it shall be more tolerable for the land of Sodom in the day of judgment than for thee. That's powerful. We know what happened to Sodom and Gomorrah, and they didn't have a fraction of the word that we have today. They did not know of Yeshua and the miracles that he performed. Now, my soul, it yearns for all the lost, but not just in Vegas, not just in Detroit, but in my family, because that's where it starts. And everyone can just do that small portion of soul-seeking and soul-saving work. We should be able to leave Sodom and Egypt once and for all. Now, here's the thing. You're not going to always be successful. Lot couldn't save his wife, his own wife. And several of the Israelites did not make it to the promised land because even when Lot's wife left Sodom, she looked back. Something in her heart couldn't leave it behind her. The same with the children of Israel. Even after being free from bondage in Egypt, they were still bound to the ways of Egypt in their hearts. Here's the thing. In order to go somewhere, you got to leave somewhere first. I don't think you heard me. In order to go somewhere, you got to leave somewhere first. In order for me to get to church today, I had to leave my house. When I was a child, I thought like a child. I spoke like a child. I understood like a child. But when I became a man, I put away childish things. I left those childish yearnings for Sodom and Egypt behind. And I'm purging them from my heart each and every day so that the Holy Spirit can dwell in me unbothered by the sins that I have been forgiven and the Lord, my Father, have forgotten about. Get Sodom and Egypt out your hearts.